Hi, I'm Dr. Megan Monday, coming to you from my office in Maryville, Tennessee. Today's topic is emotional gaslighting. So I did a Valentine's Day video on narcissistic relationships, abusive versus healthy relationships, and it was very popular. So I wanted to do a follow-up video on what is gaslighting and kind of how to spot a narcissist. This is a topic that I deal with day in and day out. A lot of times people will have abusers as parents, as partners, and the emotional wounds that come from this kind of abuse, particularly gaslighting, can last a lifetime. So I wanted to talk about some of the red flags. I was just telling someone in therapy, if a therapist ever says that's a red flag, that's kind of the non-judgmental way of saying, like, watch out, maybe get out of that relationship. That's kind of therapist code word for there's something wrong here. So just to help you read between the lines there. The first mechanism that a narcissist or abuser will use is the lie. So they'll lie about anything, and a lot of times it's kind of like a drug dealer. They'll give you the first dose of the drug for free to get you hooked. And so the way that the narcissist or the abuser will do this is they'll schmooze you. They a lot of times are very charismatic. A lot of times they seek status so that they can have some power, or if they're not, wealthy or powerful or workaholic, they might be down on their luck and they kind of are a covert narcissist. They'll use sort of that downtrodden thing, like, oh, I'm just going through a hard time, help me, sort of thing. So back to the lies. They'll really schmooze you and they'll lay it on thick to kind of get you hooked. And I think this is one of the hardest parts of the narcissistic cycle of abuse, is that healthy relationships sometimes can't compete to that honeymoon stage with the abuser, because they'll tell you whatever you want to hear as a form of manipulation. So once the initial phase of the honeymoon and the kind of love bombing happens, a lot of times what happens is people start to kind of catch the person in their lies. And so the next mechanism is denial. So say they say they're here, but they're really there, and you catch them in a lie. They'll say, oh no, I wasn't there. Baby, I wouldn't do that to you, something like that. So, denial is kind of another type of lying, and that will be kind of a justification to whatever's going on. A lot of times they'll use ammunition. So they're very good at reading people and sort of taking what's near and dear to you and kind of threatening it. That kind of can come in a later stage. Another tactic is with gaslighting, they'll try to wear you out. So, those conversations that last all night, the back and forth, the false reassurance are all kind of mechanisms where they'll try to wear the person down. They know that people who are confused are weaker, and so the more that they can kind of do this psychological manipulation and confusion, the more like vulnerable you are and the easier to victimize. Actions always speak louder than words. So because of all the lying, the denial, the wearing down, the confusion, they're really wordsmiths. And so they're using their words kind of as psychological warfare. So in healthy relationships, I think it's more important to just have the person show up for you, make sure they're consistent, that they follow through with their actions. And so the narcissist or the abusers will talk a good game, but ultimately they're not capable of showing up in this way. A lot of the sort of emotional blackmail, the gaslight, kind of feeds off positive reinforcement. So while there sometimes is kind of battering, criticism, emotional abuse, what they'll do is they'll sprinkle in a little bit of like positivity or reassurance, or again, the lies of like, what you would want to hear, like, I love you, things are going to be okay, it's us against the world kind of thing. And this is kind of the creation of the trauma bond. So it's really difficult. It's kind of like if you go to the gamble and the slot machines, every once in a while you'll win, and so it kind of keeps you hooked. And so they use that also as kind of a tactic to confuse you, because sometimes they will come through, or sometimes they will say something really sweet as a way to kind of smoke and mirror disguise a lot of the abusive things they're doing. Narcissists and abusers often project. So if they feel unworthy, they'll say, you're not good enough. If they're lying, they'll say, you're lying about something. if they're cheating, they'll say, oh, you're cheating on me. And so again, this is kind of a smoke and mirrors tactic to confuse you and to get the attention off them, and to kind of start the spiral where you doubt yourself, you doubt your reality, but your gut knows what's happening. And so a lot of times in sessions, people say, like, I think my person is cheating on me, but I'm not sure. They're denying it, you know. And so I think just not knowing for sure is a huge tactic that gets people off kilter so that they can't make a big life decision, like whether or not to end their relationship. Another really big piece of it is they'll isolate you from support. So I had a friend who was going through this, and she was never allowed to hang out one-on-one. And when we would make plans to do that, the fellow would mysteriously just appear. And so a lot of times, particularly if someone starts to kind of complain about the relationship but is not able to leave the relationship, healthy friends and family members might get sick of it, and they might kind of give up on the person. And that's kind of unfortunate, but that is a really common dynamic. It's also hard, you know, for the person who's in the relationship, they're literally undergoing psychological warfare. And so in my experience as a victim advocate, it's not easy to leave these relationships. And in fact, you have to be very calculated and be a couple steps ahead, which is no easy task because usually opposites attract. And so an abuser will pick someone who's very kind and loving as a victim. Another piece will be that they'll start to kind of question the very reality and say, no, you're the crazy one, you're paranoid, you're always worrying about this, you don't know what's going on. So again, that's another form of projection, but it sort of undermines their very sense of reality. Again, they're masters at deflection, and so they're going to blame everybody else. They're never going to take the blame. And so that's like a number one thing when I hear my clients say, this person never will admit that they're wrong. I kind of like, you know, wince a little bit when someone says that, because to me that is definitely a red flag. Also, you know, sometimes people, I personally believe that anybody can heal. Unfortunately, with narcissists and abusers, the research does show that it's much less likely. I think where that comes to is like willingness versus willfulness. If someone's willing to work on themselves, then in my mind, I think with enough hard work and determination and treatment, I think people can get better. I've seen it happen. The problem with narcissists in therapy is therapy has a bias that it only works with what the person is telling you. So if you have a liar in therapy, probably not going to be very effective. So, you know, if you've been through, if you start to think, gosh, this sounds like my mom, my dad, my partner, look up the symptoms of a narcissist. Maybe I'll do a video on that later on. Also, you know, you might Google something like narcissistic abuse and see what that happens. I always say to people, if you can't trust yourself, you don't have anything. And I think that's the most insidious part of abuse, is it creates doubt and mistrust in yourself. And so really validating your own sense of self, what's happening to you, and kind of checking the facts on those things so that you can make decisions that will give you safe, loving, and happy relationships. If you have any questions or comments, leave it in the tagline below. And thank you for watching. If you would like more information, check out my website at www.rightonbrain.com. Thank you.